Hey there, welcome to episode 64 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this on the morning of May 17, 2024. Happy Friday, whenever you happen to be listening to this. Another in the ongoing tale of starting a company, startup, here in the greater Vegas area. Today it is, in fact, telling the story. Hopefully, wherever you have found this audio program, you have access to the episode description, production near a street. If you heard the sounded like engine braking. Hopefully, you have access to the show notes. They're not very long for today's episode, but that's where I will be reading these bits from as we get started. Today's summary, which I'll read almost directly. Another episode along the path of forming a startup in Vegas. I already said that. Business and development plans around a novel product or service concept are the things that fill the hours each day. But it is important to be able to describe all of this to audiences of different kinds, ideally reaching a lean-in or aha moment with each. Did that come out right? But it is important to be able to describe all of this to audiences of different kinds, ideally reaching. Yeah. A lean-in or aha moment with each. Not always easy. I had a little typo in there. Reaching. All right. Funny story. The links for today's episode are 2 plus the usual 2 shameless self-promotion links. So we'll get those out of the way. The buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo link. You are under no obligation to buy me a coffee, though you can if you like. This is a one-pager on which I have links to the various programs I produce, various projects, and so on. I've been talking about this for weeks. Individual websites for each of the shows, each of the audio programs on there. That's Let's Innovate for Vegas. That's Cafe Genius Impresarios. That's Quabbling Sand and FFS Talk. Each has their own website with the classic under construction animated GIF on at least 2 of them. But primary point of publication for a podcast, I think is important, and it fits into the overall model of the information sharing platform that is the novel idea behind this startup. So these will form the initial test cases, if you will. I can make use of my own product or eat my own dog food, as we used to say in Silicon Valley. So yeah, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Visit that page. You do not have to buy me a coffee, but you can if you want. All of my projects are powered by coffee. Somewhat similarly, ko-fi, coffee.com/DanHugo. This has more of like a feed. And I have to be honest, I've been saying this for weeks. I don't really make use of coffee, whatever it is. You can buy me a coffee there also, not to mix brands. But once again, you don't have to. But I think this will be... I've been saying this also for too long. This is the place where I can announce when websites are launching and so on without making use of my own websites. So I've always referred to these as out of band, as in I can post anything I want on my own website, but I can create these sorts of things to point to my website, vector in. So sort of like having a Facebook page, except without the Facebook part. So there you go. Once again, no obligation to spend money, but you can if you want. I have linked to this video several times in previous episodes on this channel, maybe others, but certainly in previous episodes on this Impresarios audio program. The Simon Sinek TED Talk from a long time ago, when TED Talks were not so snazzy. It might have been a TEDx. I don't have the video up in front of me, but it's start with why. Part of your story is the why, and you can certainly start there. It's not bad advice. I don't think it's always 100%, but it's a good. He's a good presenter, genuine, authentic, perhaps. So I include that for your own consumption. In addition, I have the Guy Kawasaki 10 slides. These are posted on the Plug and Play website. They're probably available elsewhere. Here's a side note. I used to work at Apple, in Cupertino a very long time ago, before they had the spaceship. It was in, I want to say R&D 4. There was a sort of small lecture hall style presentation room, and Guy was in to give a presentation. The presentation was about, I think it was a PC Week article, PC World or PC, I think it was PC Week, and he made a point of laughing out loud at this. It was, and remember, if you will, the Macintosh back in the day, its big thing was it just works. The friendly user interface, there's no config.sys, autoexec.bat. There's no chicanery drivers to load, all that. So everything was just done for you. And to answer that, Windows came up with plug and play. So Guy gets up and he starts his presentation, introduces himself. Guy, if you don't know, was like the most prolific of evangelists way back when. So he was the fanboy's fanboy, to be sure, or fan in general. So he starts his presentation. He puts up a picture of the issue of, I think it was PC Week, with this headline, plug and play. I think it was Windows plug and play, how to make it work. And he got a huge kick out of that. He got a laugh from the audience, of course. The irony being, you shouldn't have to write an article about how to make it work. It should just work. So it was pretty good, and he's a good presenter. The energy, you can tell he was telling you what he actually felt. There was no real acting. Pretty genuine, which is important in and of itself. But his 10 slides thing is interesting because I think as an evangelist, you are telling the story or parts of it. And his 10 slides are very much about pitching to investment actors, whether it's a venture capital firm, whether it's a seed round, whatever it is, whoever you're talking to. This is a deck to impress, probably a 10-slide deck, probably 7 to 10 minutes. There are numbers. You want to include some numbers, but don't go too crazy. So 10 slides, probably about 7 to 10 minutes, and you're talking to maybe a first meeting with money, people with checkbooks maybe, and maybe they don't have them on them. So yeah, everybody thinks in terms of pitches, but I think the story is important, and so we will get to that story for this project. But first, a word from no, we don't have sponsors. First, a quick word about pitching and mingling and so on. If you are in the Vegas area, you maybe not, but you may have heard of the pitch workout room, because everybody does a pitch, but not many people practice. So there are people that create entire books in slides. Like, here's my pitch deck. It's 35 slides, each with 1 to 200 words on it. Like, that's not a pitch deck. That's a novel, a short story maybe. So the pitch workout room was something I did not invent per se. It's really an open mic for practicing pitches. So really not too creative. The fact was somebody should have done it, and so we did it. It was based actually on attending a pitch night that happens every 2 months in the Vegas area, often with non-local presenters. And the pitches are supposed to be about 7 to 10 minutes. Does that sound familiar? And people would go on for 25 minutes, maybe longer. Who knows? Who's checking their watch at that point? You're finding yourself a pillow. So I said, does anyone practice? Does anyone try to keep their presentation down to the allotted time and make it interesting, a little snappy? I am of the opinion that if you lose your audience, if you are bringing them along on your journey through your slide deck and you lose them for even little things, like, oh, I can't read that slide. Oh, that is confusing. Hey, that fact didn't match the previous slide. There could be any number of distractions. One of those distractions could be, hey, this is running really long. I've even lost track of what's happening. So the pitch practice notion was, with an audience, was to allow anyone to get up in front of a room full of people and spend 5 minutes pitching an idea, going through a slide deck. Maybe you have an existing slide deck, you want to try out some changes. You get 5 minutes, and you got 5 minutes of feedback time. Why so tight? Well, because we had 1 hour at the beginning of, it was actually right before the beginning of a monthly event in Vegas called Tech Alley. So we did that probably, what was it? We did it at least 1 year. I think it was about 15 months. And then eventually people weren't showing up anymore. It's too early. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. To me, if you ever have an opportunity that you can talk to any stand-up comedian, you have 5 minutes of stage time, but it's at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I'll be there. Right? There is no, oh, that's too early. So you got to be excited about what you're doing. That's part of, maybe that's part of your story. But it didn't have to be a pitch. It could be anything. It was mostly pitches, probably 75% with a slide deck of some sort. I always had a notion for the wild pitch, which was going to be, we never got that far. We never had people that were that practiced or that on top of their game. The wild pitch was going to be, the monitor doesn't work today, or there's some construction going on outside. So there's incessant, machine noise and sledgehammering, or maybe who knows? Who knows what's going on out there? And you have to present you got your 5 minutes. It's just that it's not a clean, neat, well-organized, fully equipped. Actually, the room we were in always had an echo. The hard walls, square room, cubicle. No golden ratio here. So there was a lot of reflection. There was a lot of echo, and that was already a little bit off-putting. But hey, you got to work with what you got. So that was probably the best practice. This is not because of me. The best practice people would have because of the people that would show up. So not only the person getting up and pitching, but the audience giving useful feedback. We had one rule: don't be mean. The idea was to provide constructive criticism, to be reasonably honest, but no vitriol, don't attack the speaker. And it worked. It was hugely successful by most measures, and reasonably successful by the rest of the measures. So winning all the way around. But when people stopped showing up, it became less practical. So the pitch, though, is considered essential. You must have a pitch. You must have a pitch deck. You must be ready to present. You will have crafted at least one, probably different variations of this pitch deck and the associated presentation that will fit into some allotted time, which is not always easy. And hit some high points. And by the way, the 5-minute limit, not every time, but often, because we didn't have like a visible clock countdown, because that's another challenge. You never know, right? You never know what you're going to have. You don't always have a clock ticking to help you with your pacing and whatnot. So you kind of got to know yourself. And quite often there would be, I would hold up a finger, 1 minute. And I would get this like, really? I'm only halfway through. So practicing the pitch and getting your pitch into some form so that you are not meandering, which we'll get into in a moment, is helpful. So by the way, my audio programs, I prepare notes. I don't have a script. I do sometimes read bullet items. I try to have subheads and 3 bullet items for each subhead. So this is everybody does a pitch. This could be a slide. I would not have the bullet items, although I might have a bullet item like pitch workout room, essential, and running over time maybe. So the pitch is considered essential. You got to have a pitch. You got to have it ready to go. And some people, like Guy Kawasaki, have their structure. Not everybody is the same way. Some people feel it should be about 12 slides. Some people feel it should be more like 8. Some people would love, I literally had somebody with money, a money person, say, I just need 3 slides. What are you doing? What do you want from me? And what am I going to get for it? That's a little cynical, but if he's in your audience, you got 7 extra slides, right? So, and you might not even have the 3 he's looking for. And so it's important to be flexible. It's important to kind of know your offering. What are you doing? What do you need? What's in it for them? 3 slides. So practice makes perfect, as they say. And again, not a new idea. If you've ever been to an open mic night, whether for comedy or which this was more inspired by that, music, poetry, there are all manner of opportunities around you somewhere where you can get up in front of people and present something, and you'll get feedback of some sort. And it would be nice if people did that more often. Watching a 7 to 10 minutes pitch go for 25 minutes, that's a lot of stretching, but I will tell you what they're doing in a moment. But often your audience will want to see numbers. They want to see a return on investment. They want to see total addressable market and all this stuff. This is the business of startups, of course, not knocking that. But during our 5-minute pitch workout room, I said very specifically, don't do numbers. There's nobody here writing you checks. So concentrate. And that's what if it's a 7 to 10 minute, you'll spend the extra 2 minutes or more on your market size and market strategy and investment and terms. Maybe if you're going to do any terms, sometimes people don't like terms in an initial deck, but gotta read the room. But 5 minutes was spent on your idea. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Where did the idea come from? Who is it for? Etc. Just take your pick. My own observation of several pitches. This was not only at the bi-monthly event. I don't want to give them any plugs, so I'm not even going to say what it is, but you can. You know what it is. It's bi-monthly here in Vegas. I think it's still going on. The pitches were mostly from out of state, which is problematic. If we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, you would hope there'd be people lined up with startup ideas. Pitches run over time, all the time, or they were. And because the presenter was, in fact, trying to tell the story with his deck or her deck. Where in Guy's 10 slides, for example, does your story fit? And if you're not inclined, I'll read the titles of the 10 slides in order. Number 1, title. 2, problem opportunity. 3, value proposition. So what's in it for me? 4, underlying magic. That's the thing that makes your product different. Even if you're launching a fast food restaurant that makes hamburgers, there must be something magic, right? Otherwise, there would only be one. There wouldn't be 10 or more. So what makes yours different? 5, business model. That's hard to, that's probably an entire discussion and presentation on its own, but the one slide summarizes it. Explain who has your money, because that's what you're trying to get from them. 6, go-to-market plan. The go-to-market, that's a hyphenated, go-to-market plan is important, and a lot of people don't think about that. 7, competitive analysis. 8, management team. The team is actually important, and I think people undersell that, depending on what it is. But if you have real expertise, if you have real experience, if you have well-known individuals, right? If you're going to launch Hollywood 2.0 in Vegas, you got to have somebody from Hollywood. So, number 9, financial projections and key metrics. So this is the sort of thing that we would leave out of the pitch workout room. And 10, the current status, accomplishments to date, timeline, and use of funds. Wow, he fit a lot of stuff in that last. Oh, shouldn't it be like 12? No, got to keep it at 10. We'll just make the font size on slide 10. Yeah, slide 10 has to be very small. So the notion is, you didn't see anywhere in there, maybe that last slide you could squeeze in, where are you telling the story? How did you come up with this? The why, right? Yeah, you can do 30 seconds on why. You can fit it into your time and put it on one of the slides maybe. Maybe that's your secret sauce. Maybe that's the magic is this all came about because, whatever excerpt of your story you're going to tell. But it's really difficult to fit it into your pitch. So when I would watch these pitches going very long, they would tend to get a little meandering somewhere in there, and it was quite often the why part, right? The details, but the how did we come about? Like, have you ever found that? So it's a story that you're connecting with your audience. I'm sure a guy would want you to do that with 3 bullets on one slide. But if you're in front of a room full of people, of your peers, where you're visiting Vegas to make this pitch and it's random people, you want to tell a story. There's nothing specifically wrong with that. There is a time and a place. But also, not every story needs to be told from the beginning to the end. And as we all know, the best storytellers start at the end. Just finishing some tea there, sorry. So in order to also, so the pitch workout room, very interesting, generally successful, like I said. So there was another component. I found that people were, after the pitch workout room, because we only had 1 hour, then 10 a.m. So this started at 9, 10 a.m. The day would begin officially on the schedule. So I would always say, I don't want to eat into your time. This is, our event time slot is 1 hour, but you have the rest of the day to talk to each other. So by all means, ask questions, follow up, etc. Just like real life. And what I found is that people would hang around in the room for a few minutes in little clusters, 3 or 4 people around each presenter. And, what's before you leave, can I ask you? And it was always a little mingling going on. And so I had said, you know what, we should practice this. Because what I was finding was, in the pitch workout room, you're in a room of people who just heard you make a structured presentation of some sort, or, whatever you were doing for your 5 minutes. So you've primed the pump of discussion with a presentation, which is totally fine. That's valid. But what I was finding in mingle scenarios, right? There's an event at the Innovation Center. There's an event at there's a networking event. There's any little gathering where there's not a formal presentation window. You're just running into people. Oh, what do you do? Nobody practices that. So I said, what would be interesting is if we had a pitch mingle practice session where you go to a social setting. So we would go to coffee shops. Why coffee shops? Well, because you don't have to be 21 to be in a coffee shop, and you do not need to be 21 to start a company. There are some very smart people that are not allowed in bars. So in a coffee shop, in at least one case after hours, which was nice. So started at 6, went to 8, I think it was. So we had time for people to show up, and then we had a timer for 2 minutes, and people would be able to, in this casual situation, mingle and talk to each other like, hey, what are you working on? And we would try to have 2 minutes of interrupted time, to be honest. So I would tell people, you know what? You don't even worry about being on time. You can show up whenever you want, and you can leave whenever you want. Why is that? Well, we have 2 hours. We're going to give you 2 minutes, and it's not really struck, like there's not a loud buzzer. Although I tried that, and that just didn't work. But the idea was, there's going to be cacophony. There's going to be interruption. There's going to be people coming and going. There's going to be all manner of distraction. So you may not have 2 minutes. As I would always say, you may be in a room or somewhere. You're talking to someone. You look over their shoulder. You notice out of the corner of your eye, someone is heading for the exit. And you look and you say, oh, I've been trying to get to talk to that person for 2 months, but they're leaving. So you're like, oh, wait, hang on. So that the conversation you're in the middle of stops. So hopefully that was not a conversation that should not have stopped. You very quickly head towards the exit, maybe hopefully block the person from leaving. Hey, I've been trying to get in touch with you. Can I give you my card? What are you working on? Or maybe they're being rude, but maybe they're heading to the airport. Maybe they, like, I'm late, I got to go. So they're not necessarily rude, but they're not necessarily, giving you their undivided attention. They may even look at their watch. I really got to head out. Now, moment of truth. You've got 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Anything more than that, you might be pushing them away. So what are you going to do with those 10 to 20 seconds? We don't always have that attentive audience. We don't always have the time. We don't always have a deck ready. Sometimes it's chaos. So you might have, you don't even have your numbers. You don't have them off the top of your head. All kinds of stuff. So you maybe tops 30 seconds. What are you going to do? The elevator pitch is not the story, right? You got an elevator pitch, but it's not the story. The elevator pitch is sometimes parts of the story. Sometimes it's parts of your presentation. Sometimes it's numbers. Sometimes it's not. So you got this 20 seconds. What are you going to do? And you kind of got to read the room. You kind of got to decide what is what is this person going to be expecting? What are they looking for? How can I make them lean in? And so the elevator pitch is something worth practicing. And there are people who do offer advice on elevator pitches, and then sometimes they'll do some practice. But I didn't find there was enough sort of free-form practicing, so we tried that for a while. People didn't get it, so that came to an end. And that's the story of the pitch mingle. But yeah, you got 30 seconds. So suppose you are 20 seconds, like maybe at 20 seconds they're looking at their watch again, and you got to be on that because you don't want to make them miss their plane or whatever they're doing. But hopefully in the 10 to 20 seconds, you impress upon this person that they really want to hear more. So the other thing, so somewhere in your toolbox of future success, you should have that 30 to 120 seconds of elevator pitch, maybe even 10 seconds. Somebody once asked me, describe what you're doing in 5 words. Can you do that? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Make information discoverable, and it has to be collaborative, I guess. I would have to work on that. But, can you do that? Because sometimes you have 2 seconds. So somewhere under your pitch deck, next to your elevator pitch, or maybe vice versa, is the story, the origin, the motivation, the hopes, the goals, in some human terms. This may be when I was a kid, a friend of mine, when I was in the Army, when I was working at a big company, anything. It could be, what got you here. That is the why, right? The supporting material for why, all of it. Now, you're probably not going to tell this entire story from the beginning to end. Like I said, maybe you'll start at the end. It's not always a monologue. So sometimes it's a conversation. It may be a conversation after your pitch deck presentation given after an effective 30-second, 20-second elevator pitch the week before, right? So if I kind of dropped one of my lines here. You do a good elevator pitch for the person leaving. You've been wanting to talk to them forever. You impress them in 20 seconds and they give you an hour next week. Oh, that worked. Okay. So better setup. So now you're there, you talk to them. You make your presentation, you got 10 to 20 minutes, you do your thing, but they gave you an hour. So you got like 30 to 40 minutes of space to fill. So they may be, I am interested in this idea. Tell me, how did you come up with this? Or where did you go to school? Or how did you get your team together? Where did you meet so-and-so? So the story is your timeline, your narrative, not always going to be presented in linear fashion. It may be conversational, and it may be jumping around a little bit. Oh, I met my founders when I was in school, or when I was working in Silicon Valley, or when I was traveling. I met them at a hackathon. I met them at 2 different hackathons, and then we got together at a different hackathon. It could be anything. And if you can let the person that you are trying to impress drive the questions, then you will be able to answer them. You won't be wandering around. See, the elevator pitch is often not directed. It's a shot in the dark sometimes. But here, if you are able to answer questions sincerely and authentically, you will probably help your case. And you should have that available in such a way that you can tell different parts of it in order, out of order, without. Ideally, you won't leave out little details like, oh, let's have a meeting next week for an hour. And it helps quite a bit if the story is true. That if you can make up a story and tell it out of order and be consistent, maybe you should not spend time on your startup. Maybe you should write novels. But in reality, a true story that you are able to tell in a sincere way with authenticity, which leads to this person people you're speaking to leaning in a little bit more and saying, you know what, the pitch was good, the story is even better. This could be a real thing, and it looks like you're going to stay with it the whole time, hopefully. So if you've heard the previous 2 or 3, at least 2 episodes of Cafe Genius Impresarios, you know that since the Impresarios audio program is supposed to be about people, entrepreneurial startups, innovators, doing what they're doing in our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem here in the Greater Vegas area, I figured I should do it for this startup idea that I am presently pursuing, and we can talk about it along the way. It's like free content, and that's the only thing that matters in today's world. So the the platform the startup involves a platform that is actually being developed at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. It's a project called MyMuni. It is essentially as it started and as it's continuing, a platform for information sharing and discovery for at city scale. So local news as information sharing is not a new thing, and so we're basing it on this initial project. But there are so many new technologies, new methodologies, and of course ways to include more people in capturing not only their opinions, which we do too much of, but real data. Like you can tell me the story. It's almost like Yelp reviews, which I've talked about previously. Yelp reviews are very weak on objective data and overly silly on subjective data. So you get to give a 1-star, 5-star. And I think now they have a more granular like cost and location or something. I think Yelp does that. But then you have free reign to tell a goofy story. I was in there with my boyfriend the other day, and my family came into town, and the person stepped on my foot, and so they got this whole rambling narrative about their one time that they went. Oh, I talked about this when I was talking about product reviews. So one person with one experience, they really fill it out. So that's anecdote, but it's not really data. Data is like they received a B on their health department inspection on this date, and I was there and I noticed some dirty tables, or they sprayed the tables with cleaning solution near where we were eating so I could taste that. These are the sorts of things you're like, hey, this is a problem. This is a specific problem. In fact, I was involved in a startup effort many years ago where we had micro reviews. So instead of writing a 10-page missive, you would write a Twitter-sized micro review and mention the way, a cleaning solution sprayed a table next to us didn't taste as good. And these are the sorts of things that can be addressed individually and so on. So similarly, capturing your story, for example, here in the Greater Bay, I live in the northern part of the region, not too far north, but I live in Las Vegas proper. I think it's 12 miles north of the stratosphere, if you're familiar with the area. So there are coyotes, occasionally snakes and scorpions. It's the desert. So every once in a while, someone will post on the awful website known as Nextdoor, hey, coyotes were running down the street. That's reasonably helpful, but it's an anecdote. It has a time and a date stamp, but it's not really captured as data. It's just another story. You can search for a headline, tell me all the stories about coyotes. That's not quite as helpful. But if you actually capture that data and you actually turn that into information, right? You start aggregating coyote sightings and you plot them on maps with times and dates. You correlate it with weather, water availability, etc. You can start to build a habitat encroachment map based on crowdsourced data, right? People actually seeing things and reporting them with time and location and date and all that. The same is true of a lot of things. So rather than telling stories or trolling other people with your comments, you can actually contribute to a data set that can grow over time and be useful and be part of an information sharing concept, which is what we're building. This is not the goal of many local news outlets to involve people. And I'll get to that part of my story in a moment. Opting instead for whatever gets eyeballs with clickbait headlines. And by the way, that's what headlines have been about all the time. It's all about getting you could have two identical news stories in two newspapers at a newsstand, if anybody remembers those days. The one with the more exciting headline probably has more people, 10 cents, 25 cents back then? Oh, I'll take that one. That one looks more exciting. So it's really all about making that first impression and stealing the customer. It's rare that people will buy two newspapers back then. Today, people, of course, can read multiple websites and so on, so it's not quite the same challenge, but certainly the headline is sometimes the only thing people read. So making it sexy is what it's about. And it's unfortunate because you don't always get the news or the story, you get the headline. And there are gatekeepers, journalists, editors, the publisher itself. Publishers still online, and they're preventing actual local news about actual local people sometimes because who wants to hear about your startup doing a new news website? We got a baseball stadium to build. We got a major famous resort shutting down in 60 days and about a year and a half. Yeah, about a year and a half. No, 2 years, almost 2 years. These are the stories that get attention. 2 years, it'll become Hard Rock. So these are the things that make news, like I said. And there are a lot of stories that don't get told or don't get found, which I think is unfortunate, possibly because journalists don't have the time or they don't think it'll be worth the space on the site. When I worked at Salon.com, one of the theories was you should never publish a page that does not make money, advertising or otherwise. So the motivation is not necessarily in line with the needs of a people, of a community, of a city, of an innovation hub or innovation destination, as I prefer to call it. So the people who consume local news media today will often resort to posting a link to their social media presence. So if I see a news article, I might post it to, if I was still using Twitter or X or Facebook or something like this, I might post a link and make a snarky comment because that's what I want to do. Like, oh, I'm glad to see they're spending money on education instead of baseball stadiums, right? And then have a picture of the new A's stadium proposal for the Tropicana site. So I can be snarky and whatnot. That's my editorial review of this article. I may not have even read the article. I post it and then people will comment, and then someone else may post the same article somewhere else with a different thread of conversation. So by sending out the link to the news story, in this case about the stadium, you're helping spread the word that the article exists. You're not necessarily getting people to interact with the article. They're interacting with the person who posted the article and each other, outdoing each other, trolling, and so on. So is that valuable? Maybe. It's been the status quo for a long time. Does that help with awareness? Does that help with discovery? I posit that it does not. So I have found that telling the story of what this project is and what it's about is helpful. It doesn't fit in a 5 to 10 minute early presentation. There's no pitch deck. Not yet, anyway. But there is a story. So that is where we will be now. I don't have any notes for this, so this will just be the narrative. Occasionally I have opportunities to tell some of it, parts of it, very rarely all of it. So I will say that I've been involved with media for quite some time, and I've made observations about how media is consumed and used by your neighbors, by people around you, by people around me, people around us, only getting worse with the advent of the social media scenario I already described. So what we have is people relying on someone else to tell them things, even though the things are happening all around them. This was not helped at all. I don't really harp on this too much, but it was not helped at all with the way data was reported during the pandemic, during the pandemic lockdowns and so on. Reporting time series data, that's a series. Time series data is a real thing, and it should be recorded and reported accurately. And here in Southern Nevada, I found at some point a document that said the timestamps on individual case reports could be any of 5 possible times, varying by days based on when they first had symptoms, when they were exposed, when they were tested, when they, absolutely ridiculous. So that information was often obscured. So you just got these graphs. And so people were very much spectators, and they could have been proactively involved. And the coyote example I gave is one. Beehives, similar. Water water consumption. Now, I've often said, if you're going to have a local news site and water is one of your concerns, as it is here in Southern Nevada, why is it that all of our local news sites always have the weather on their websites? Usually in the top, in the title, in the hero section, top of the website. You always got the sunny, cloudy temperature. Why is there not a water level? Like, you just add one more icon with water going up, going down. Nope. And by the way, if you live in a desert and you see that, oh, look, today it's going to be over 100. Yep. We talked about this last year around this time. However, the water level may be drastically different, and that gets very little attention. So why are we not sharing useful information with people all the time and in useful ways? So one of the problems I've had, and I worked at Salon, as I mentioned, and their roots were in print media. In fact, I want to say they had a print magazine in their early 1 or 2 years. When I was working there, they were 10 years old. They had been public for 10 years. Just after I arrived, I think they had a profitable quarter, which, I don't need to say why, but my job, first of all, I was a developer at a newspaper, a software developer at a news magazine with reporters and news stories and so on. So when I departed Salon, I had said, the New York Times is not inventing printing presses. They are buying them. They're not in the business of developing these things. They're to use them. Their product is something else. So it was a little weird in that environment, but my initial project when I got there was to, and this is in the old days, to add a facility where we could capture user feedback and place it in or next to articles. So nowadays you just call it comments or discussion. There's an entire service, which I don't know if it's still in business, Discuss, DISQUS, Discuss. So you would log in, have a Discuss username or whatever, and then there would be a Discuss widget after an article, and you could comment, and you've already logged in. So, same person, see their other comments and all that. And there are some social dynamics about that are interesting. But Salon had acquired The Well, which was a pretty well-known discussion platform with a very strong community. So when they acquired The Well, I was sitting right next to the person who was essentially like the founder of The Well. And she and I had some very interesting conversations about what it means to be inviting the readership to participate, making comments on published news articles. It was actually literally called Letters to the Editor, except that the letter would be automatically published next to the article and could be responded to, as opposed to actually sending an email to the editor of the Salon magazine and 1 or 2 getting published. That's classic, or 10 or whatever, print media style letter to the editor. So this was a digital version of that with really no filter. It could be moderated. So that was an afterthought, like, we should be able to delete these. But even questions like, should people be able to post anonymously? Should people be marked as members? They could be subscribers to the site, or they could just be casual. I gave my email address and my personal, blog or whatever link and my name, and here's what I have to say. This is a common, you'll find this on LiveJournal and, other classic blogging platforms. Oh yeah, you can make a comment. Just maybe you get an email confirmation. Did you post this? Yes. Okay. And moderation could happen later, et cetera, et cetera. There's all sorts of things that are commonplace now, but this was in 2005, a while ago. So it was interesting to see 2 things. One, people really took to it. Initially, when they were able to voice their opinions directly on the articles, there was a floodgates. There would be occasions where the one machine that was hosting the letters feature was really having problems, and possibly software design issues, but surely I wouldn't blame me for that. But so it was very popular to be able to express an opinion. And these were just text. These were just words. So there's no quote unquote data. These are the old days. But the other reaction, which was unexpected, was from the writing staff, the professional journalists, the guest columnists, the contractual external writers. For example, Cory Doctorow was a contributor, external, famously Boing Boing and the impoopification, of everything on the internet. I make reference to that quite a bit because it's true. So Cory Doctorow, that was my first exposure to him, and Zini Jardin, was it? I can't remember. Anyway, so that was Boing Boing, and that was Salon. So Salon had a variety of the in-house and external, contracted, and so on journalists and writers, and some of them had a really interesting response. Are you telling me that anyone can write whatever they want and it will appear next to what I wrote? I'm a professional journalist. How is this even possible? So the pushback was interesting because, first of all, at the time, contemporaneously, it was like, you're making a big thing of this. Retrospectively, they were correct. Like, how can you possibly let someone who has no idea what they're talking about post opinion without, and one of the proposals I made based on this, I didn't reach this conclusion until later, but something I commented on at the time, and this is when Open Salon was in development. So the letters figured prominently into, let's see how this works and what will factor into the Open Salon concept. What do you know about the people that are posting these things? We've learned over the years that if someone posts a fact, whether they are a subject matter expert, whether they're posting opinion, whether they're posting conspiracy theory, there's some subtle nuance there. And if you amplify the right thing, great. If you amplify the wrong things, not as great. So what does it mean when people contribute their discussion items to an article? It can be a little bit daunting, could be good, could be bad. You get traffic, people are interested. I want to participate. I want to voice my opinion. But the utility ends up being, well, you fed somebody's ego, you riled up, you've got the dopamine, you've got the adrenaline, all the neurochemicals are flowing. Maybe you're getting click traffic, you've got your ads flowing through your ad fountain. But at the end of the day, what comes of these comment threads? Is there any utility in them? And it's like, maybe there's some. So a couple of things have combined or converged, I suppose, here in Vegas. The My Muni project. So I'm also the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, and the My Muni project used to be called My Vegas. Was conceptually, we should have, if this is a smart city, we should have a starting point where people go to find information, whether it's news or whether it's weather or water levels or habitat encroachment or news about education, news about upcoming elections, news about, but not just the news. Show me a map with polling sites. Don't show it in a newspaper article, which is sort of fleeting. That newspaper article doesn't get read tomorrow. It might be read today. So tucking information into newspaper articles doesn't make that information generally available. So what if you said, hey, let's have an entire digital section dedicated to elections. And so you can indicate polling places on a map. You can verify them. They're not fraudulent. They're not game playing. You're not getting told, this election cycle, we're voting on Wednesday. Whatever, right? All kinds of dirty tricks are tried. So to be able to find authoritative, correct, or verifiable, at least, information would be useful, not tucking it into news articles. And here's the problem with news articles of yesteryear. They are written episodically. You should be able to come upon a newspaper article and say, I've never heard of this. So the first paragraph, or maybe two, is the inverted pyramid, classic journalism. If you remember from some time, hopefully you've heard this. Start off the opening paragraph, or the beginning of the article should be who, what, why, where, when, how. And at some point when I was learning this stuff, they said, and now we're adding wow, because you got to make it exciting. So you start with your inverted pyramid, and then maybe 80% of an article is the backstory to catch people up because they may not have read the previous article. So this episodic article needs to stand on its own. It should be visible without its related articles, right? I'm doing this audio program today. It's sort of related to the previous two, but if you didn't hear them, okay, you can still listen to this one. I have not been filling you in on the previous two episodes, though. Why is that? Because you can still go listen to them. So rather than spending 75% of this episode talking about the previous points along the timeline, the progression of events or discussions or monologue in this case, I can say, well, here, in fact, I can spend all of the time of this audio program or an article on the subject matter at hand or the timely series of events or changes in circumstance or whatever it is related to the moment. And I can link them together in a timeline or on a map or using a network graph or any number of tools that are commonplace now. So why are we not doing that? We're still, even though we are publishing websites in a completely modern infrastructure, the internet's, cloud hosted, fully automated, social media connections, automatically posting to Twitter and whatnot, and Open Graph for sharing, optimal sharing to news feeds so that people don't even have to read the articles anymore. Just look at the picture and read the headline. That's all. So we have some of that, but it's really, it's essentially a retread of newsstands with newspapers with competing headlines for the same, essentially the same news story, right? So the coolest headline wins, or the one that riles up the most readership gets more dimes and quarters or whatever. But now a newspaper probably costs like $5 if it's a nice thick one. So you subscribe to an online news service, you're going to get episodic news articles. Yes, they cross-link to each other, maybe, but you're still reading the same basic format. So the notion for my Muni was, what if we start doing things to make our smart city smarter, and we actually make real community calendars that are based on actual calendars, not a WordPress plugin that's junk. Like, we actually implement an iCalendar server, a CalDave server that works with iCalendar streams, ICS files, so that it can really interoperate with other calendar servers, Google Calendar, Outlook, Yahoo, others. So, people have phones in their pocket. They can use calendars. Why can they not use calendars? Why are we using Meetup and Eventbrite? We can be using real calendars. Community calendars can be manipulated to do what we need them to do. Like, I just want to see events at this location. I want to see events at the Smith Center for the rest of the year. I want to get an email when something is added to this calendar. I want to find out from 5 different venues. I want to put them together into one calendar so that I can always know I can subscribe to one calendar and not as text. So everybody thinks, oh, RSS feeds are done. What if you could actually just subscribe to the calendar and you look at your phone and or your calendar software, wherever it is, phone, tablet, computer, smart display, who knows, and just say, oh, look, next Thursday, my favorite comedian is going to be there, or my favorite performer, or there's an event coming up next Tuesday or at the end of the month or something. At my favorite art museum, there's going to be a presentation. So you can actually watch locations or performers or particular dates. These are things that have existed for decades, yet nobody is doing this. You can look at discovery, you can look at information sharing as new problems, but they were actually solved already. The internet did a lot of interesting things with semantic web and general content publishing, indexing, ontologies, things like folksonomies, and which is a taxonomy that you allow the reader to tag things, right? Keywords, hashtags. Everybody's got hashtags on their mind, but the actual utility of those is legitimate, especially if you extend that with what do they call them? Flickr used to call them machine tags. It's like triples or something. It's not triples like RDF. But you can actually say you had a namespace. So an example would be geo:"lat" equals latitude. Geo:"long" equals longitude. Probably LNG. You could tag a photo with that information, and that would indicate exactly where the photo was taken. You don't have to actually implement database and user interface, you can enable the user, the client, the consumer, the reader, the client, however you want to look at it, to add not just textual information, hashtag whatever, hashtag not sure, hashtag, but actual namespaced information that you would expect, like beehive, latitude, longitude. You can actually indicate that there is an actual beehive here. Folksonomies, general taxonomy, an entire ontology science, an entire language called OWL, web ontology language. Of course, the O and W, switch those. These things all exist already. So now it's not even a question of inventing. The innovation will come in applying some new things like ActivityPub, like data analysis. Well, of course, the advent of machine learning will make summaries, classification of news articles, cross-linking, discovery of actors. For example, is this a story about a political figure named John Doe or a normal person named John Doe? That entity resolution is an entire science, knowing who you're talking about based on the information you have available. That's tricky, so that's not a version 1. But at the end of the day, if we take modernity and we apply it to the legacy of news reporting, we enable community scale, city scale information sharing with participation from the people in those communities, in that city, in that region. If they can actually participate in meaningful ways rather than just rattling off a troll comment or generally not being constructive, not being helpful. If we can enable that in useful ways, and not only that, but enable people to build on that, we can have specific vertical applications of various types of data. For example, there's an awful website called Meetup. If you want to have a meetup, you can go to Meetup. You can create an event. You can pay them too much money, more than they deserve, and you will be in the pool of meetups. And you can indicate the venue. You can indicate the topic, and people can join and indicate that they're going to attend. So far, so good. The calendar, they'll email you a calendar link so you can be reminded that the event that you are going to attend is coming up, and that's all well and good. Can you subscribe to an event calendar? Well, you gotta add it to your notifications on Meetup. Okay, so if I also use Eventbrite and LinkedIn and Facebook, and so that's a lot of incompatible calendar systems. But we already talked about that. iCalendar, CalDave, these are standards, been around for decades. Why don't we use those? Well, because vendor lock-in. It doesn't serve them to enable you. So there's an event coming up at the end of May. So remember, this is May 17th. So May 30th, there's an event in Vegas that I noticed, and it said, still looking for event venue or looking for location or something like that. Now, I've been talking about this for years. Why is there not a vendor marketplace? Like, I'm having an event, and this happened to me with our Genius Roundtable, Cafe Genius Roundtable. I need round tables. Can I find a venue that offers a round table for about 8 people? Why a round table? Social dynamics. There is no head of the table. There is no micro conversation going on with the person in front of you. Everybody sees each other, round table. Socially dynamically critical. Where do you find round tables? Would it have been useful to post my event in the marketplace and say, I am looking for a venue with round tables, and have the venue participate and say, we have round tables? Or maybe have a database of venues that includes things like, we have round tables. So connecting the venue to the meetup, why would you want to do that? Because when you have meetups in venues that are commercial retail locations, restaurants, coffee shops, bars, whatever, you are bringing customers to them. Sometimes they don't know you're doing this. So if you involve them in the process, they may promote your event. They may make some accommodations. They may offer discounts. They may be interested in an ongoing relationship. They may enter the marketplace and say, hey, this works well. Can we invite more people to participate here in our location with their events and bring people? And in exchange for that, we'll offer some value proposition. So the notion of a marketplace of venue availability and booking seems to make sense to me. Is a local news platform going to do that? No. Is Meetup going to do that? No. Is Eventbrite going to do that? No. So we have the wherewithal in our smart city to be a smarter city by doing things that are unusual. And here's the piece de resistance, because I don't want to go too far. There's a little bit more to the story, but some of the story is still being written. But here's the thing, and this is why for Innovate for Vegas Foundation, we renamed it from My Vegas to My Muni. Now, it's very difficult to find civic volunteers that want to work on open source projects, which the base platform for this will be. So the My Muni project, open source, much like WordPress. Now, WordPress has 80-something% of the internet is powered by WordPress. Salon.com, by the way, eventually capitulated and is based on or is published on with WordPress. So open source developers, civic volunteers, we Innovate for Vegas has always had this notion of a value for value model or labs deployment. So a way to take volunteer effort and turn it into monetizable, we'll say, effort for some form of contribution. It may be jobs, it may be continuing projects, it may be actual money, it may be donation, whatever it is. There's a variety of different paths. Here in this case, because it will be an information sharing platform, probably advertising, possibly subscriptions, possibly direct sponsorship or donations. Things will be powered by the civic volunteers of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, for example. So there's a lot that can be done with volunteer time to make it valuable after the fact. And as I've told people, for the entire time I've been affiliated with Innovate for Vegas Foundation, I absolutely do not want people to work for free, but I want you to be willing to work for free, because this is about community elevation, but also something about skills development and developing a personal portfolio and becoming recognized. You know, when you build the modern take on an information sharing platform for an entire city, you might get noticed. You might be doing, somebody might be making a comment. Oh, did you see the new, this new site has this thing? And yeah, I worked on that. Yeah, I did that part. The part that you're looking at right now, I did that. So there's some value when you develop locally and you have local users that you can interact with and you can co-create with. That's a whole nother element of this. It's not, here's our new site, read it. It's, here's this information sharing platform and you are a part of it, and tell us if we missed something or what new feature do we need to add or things like this. So My Muni, rather than be My Vegas, can be inviting to civic volunteers from around the country or beyond. And in light of the recent change at Code for America, where they sunset the brigade program, there are similar organizations to the Innovate for Vegas Foundation around the country with civic volunteers who might have a desire to participate in a project that will be community elevating, but they don't have the infrastructure in place anymore. They maybe lost some motivation, any number of reasons why these efforts may have entered a lull, taking a break, perhaps, hopefully. So why not aim for a information sharing platform that is not Vegas centric? Build a platform that works in Vegas, but could also work in other places and accept creative works, contributions in typical open source project form from other open source developers. They can join the project formally, they can offer suggestions informally, etc. There's any number of ways to participate, and they can not only be coders, but they can be more creative, user interface, language translation, testing, marketing, maybe even telling the story. But the piece de resistance, as I mentioned, and as we draw this story to a close for today's episode, the piece de resistance is this. There are 40 million people, give or take, visiting the Greater Vegas area each year, based on numbers from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. It may be slightly more than 40 million. It may more likely be slightly less, but it's a reasonable number, 40 million. 40 million people visit this area, and there are any number of useful tools, some not as useful, to help people discover things, to help them find events and venues and locations and shows and gambling tips and places to eat, places to drink, a myriad. And that's all well and good. how can we make the visitor experience better? How can we show that this is a smart city, in fact, a smarter smart city? So we have 40 million people to interact with, to engage with. The My Muni project has a peer project called Welcome, and it aims at visitors to a location. So where My Muni is focused on people who live here, like, hey, where do I go to report a beehive? That's an actual story, which I'll skip over for today, but that's an actual thing. And finding out who to call was a pain. And it turns out there's a phone number right on the LVMPD website, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So who knew? Call the cops. And they literally say, here's a number to call for beehives. When I asked the city of Las Vegas that, they didn't know that. So information sharing is a real thing. Making information available for people who live here and capturing information from them as well is very useful. It's valuable, and it includes people in their own community in something other than trolling fashion on Nextdoor. We throw in the Open Transit Project, another Innovate for Vegas Foundation project. Well, if you're visiting Vegas, you might need to know where the buses are. How do I deal with buses? I don't speak English. Oh, we only help you if you're an English or Spanish speaker. Sorry. The internet has solved that problem. Language translation is no longer a major issue. Perfect translation is an issue, but how many times have I tried to help German, Polish, Japanese, more tourists visiting Vegas, pointing at their phone with a quizzical look? I don't know where I'm going. So we can actually address these things from the bottom up, from people who live here, who want to make it easier to get around, not only for us, but for friends, family, colleagues, and just plain old visitors who help us avoid paying income tax. So all of this is doable because we have surpassed the technological needs of such a notion. Now it's a matter of implementation. So I'm not saying there's no innovation. There's plenty of room for innovation, but none of this is boy, I wish we had artificial intelligence tools to help with news summaries to properly categorize them and place them on timelines. Those sorts of things are now at least on the table. We have the technology to deploy maps, lists, timelines, graphs, do basic event analysis, timeline structure, time series data analysis is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's it. So we got 40 million people visiting. We got 2.3 million people who live in the Southern Nevada area. That's a lot of diverse population possibilities to develop a really new way of sharing information with people, monetizing it like a normal media platform. And as we know, those are failing. But the fact is, we are doing this with open source software. So we're not concerning ourselves with initial startup, huge salaries. Tech salaries are already going down anyway. We're not looking to hire 50 people in marketing and so on. This is a grassroots, bottom up. Hey, I built this, friends and family, organic, and let's see what happens. A grand experiment. And I will remind people who are not already aware, Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a Nevada nonprofit, 501c3 public charity. So some of the efforts that go on there can benefit from being a charitable organization. So people are able to donate to that effort, tax deductible. Consult your tax preparation professional. This is not tax advice, nor is it legal advice. But all that said, that's what we're working on. And we'll see if we can turn this into an actual business, not only in the greater Vegas area, but for anyone to deploy anywhere. Maybe they'll even interoperate. Local news implemented from the top down has had problems. So we're going to try to implement a local information sharing platform, information sharing and data capture and analysis and presentation from the bottom up, from people who are in the locality, who actually care about not only how it works, but that it works. And it works for the people around them. And maybe even something they can brag about later. So that is the story, at least most of it. I tell it all the time when we add in some things about group discovery, using some old standards called friend of a friend and description of a project to help discover what other former brigades are working on and who's working on them and what their projects are. If we can do that from the bottom up, we are able to discover who's working on what projects that might be related to what we're working on and try to collaborate a little bit rather than relying on a central authority and relying on that central authority to keep people updated, right? So if we become responsible for sharing our current list of projects, progress, etc., and we make that available for others to use in standard ways, which already exist, then we make communication a matter of fact, not something to deal with. So, and we can build on that from there. So lots of stuff going on, a lot of things that are not quite in the story, but are part of the story, adjacent to the story. But this was the basic idea. And I've had this conversation in various orderings frequently over the last year. And so we are making this happen, and we'll see what happens as we make it happen, as it happens. And that is where I will leave it for today. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo if you'd like to find the links to all the productions, all the audio productions I have so far. Will there be video productions? Maybe. I'd like to do a streaming show, maybe talk to people interactively with actual, I don't know about Discord maybe, but some sort of, live chatting interaction. I think that would be valuable, especially as we launch our information sharing and data capture platform to involve more people with more information sharing and discussion. Wouldn't that be a thing? And that is where I'll leave it. Thank you so much for listening, as always. And also coffee.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to spend any money. But those are my sort of anchor public, here's where you find my stuff, tools. Maybe we should add that to we'll talk about that later. All right. We'll catch you next week.